I am so excited to be here this year and share our annual update. So essentially, this is an update that is going to talk about what we've done since our annual conference in June 2025. So thank you for being here for our policy day. Your presence reflects a commitment to a principle that should never be controversial, which is that every human being deserves equal citizenship, equal protection under the law, and the freedom to live according to their conscience without fear. 1 year ago, we concluded our conference named Uprooted and Endangered with a challenge that the international community must stop viewing the plight of Egypt's Copts as a collection of isolated incidents and begin recognizing the systemic forces that continue to undermine equal citizenship. Over the past year, Coptic Solidarity has worked tirelessly to document those realities, to advocate for those whose voices have been silenced, and bring the concerns of Egypt's indigenous Christian community before policymakers, governments, and international institutions. Today, I want to reflect on what we have accomplished since that last conference. This has been one of the most productive years in Coptic Solidarity's history. Since June 2025, we have published several major reports. We actually had a session last year about the report that we published right after it, called Cairo's Covert Power in Washington, an analysis of the Egyptian lobby in the United States since 2014. That report was able to be written because the FARA documentation was finally published on the Department of Justice's website. That groundbreaking report documented how the Egyptian government spent nearly $19 million on lobbying and public relations efforts in Washington while conducting more than 5,500 lobbying activities. It exposed the mechanisms and through which foreign influence campaigns seek to shape policy discussions and obscure ongoing human rights and religious freedom concerns. We followed that by a report, UNESCO's Future Leadership, a critical evaluation of Egypt's candidacy. This was at the time when Egyptian former Minister of Antiquities, Khalid al-Nani, was seeking election as Director General of UNESCO. We examined his record regarding cultural preservation, religious freedom, heritage protection, and the destruction of religious sites. Although Dr. Anani eventually secured the position with the UN, our report succeeded in bringing unprecedented scrutiny to Egypt's heritage record and generated important discussions among policymakers, diplomats, journalists, and civil society organizations. Our goal wasn't just to influence an election, it was to ensure accountability. As Mr. Anani assumes one of the world's most important cultural leadership positions, his tenure warrants close international attention. We believe UNESCO's leadership should be held to the highest standards of transparency, heritage preservation, and respect for cultural and religious diversity. Most recently, we released our special report, Erosion of Citizenship in Egypt, State-Managed Religious Governance and Institutional Islamization under President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. This report is actually the reason we chose this year's conference theme. For years, discussions about discrimination against Copts have focused primarily on individual incidents, church attacks, blasphemy prosecutions, abductions, or barriers to church construction. While these issues remain critically important, our research demonstrates that they are symptoms of a deeper structural transformation taking place within the Egyptian state. Religious authority has not replaced political authority. It has instead become structurally embedded within it. Islamic institutions participate directly in governance. Religious norms increasingly shape public space. Legal and administrative mechanisms regulate religious identity, religious expression, and dissent. Paradoxically, while the current regime presents itself internationally as a bulwark against political Islam and safeguard against the return of the Muslim Brotherhood, many of the institutional outcomes increasingly resemble the concerns observers expressed during the Brotherhood's brief rule in 2012 to 2013. The consequence is not merely symbolic religiosity in politics, it is the gradual restructuring of citizenship itself. Equal citizenship increasingly operates within a framework that privileges the religious identity of the majority while imposing structural constraints on non-Muslims and in many cases on dissenting voices within the Sunni Muslim community itself. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Equal citizenship increasingly operates within the framework that privileges, the religious identity. Unless meaningful legal and institutional reforms address these inequalities, the gap between the constitutional promise of equal citizenship and the lived reality of religious hierarchy will continue to widen. So that's why we chose the title of the conference, Egypt's Theocratic Governance Backsliding, More Risks for Citizenship Rights. Because what is at stake today is not simply the rights of Copts, it's the future character of Egyptian citizenship itself. So throughout the year, we have advocated for some of the most urgent human rights cases in Egypt. We launched an international campaign for Saeed Mansour Resk Abdelrazak, a Christian convert who has faced years of persecution, arbitrary detention, forced separation from his family, and eventual refoulement despite receiving international protection. He was actually refouled after a Russian judge issued an order that he should not be refouled, and UNHCR had given him documentation that he qualified for asylum, and he was still sent back to Egypt. Today, he faces terrorism-related proceedings for what is fundamentally a matter of conscience and religious belief. His case demonstrates the reality that conversion from Islam to Christianity can effectively be treated as a national security offense rather than a protected human right. Dr. Saman is another person that we've advocated for. He was subjected to a secret trial, denied meaningful access to legal representation, and sentenced to 5 years with hard labor in under Egypt's blasphemy provisions. His case illustrates how blasphemy laws continue to be used not to protect religious harmony, but to silence powerful expression and intellectual inquiry. Importantly, we have now raised both the cases of Dr. Saman and Saeed Abdelrazak officially with the United Nations. They're no longer simply domestic concerns for Egypt. They have become international human rights concerns involving freedom of belief, due process, arbitrary detention, and the misuse of national security and blasphemy laws to suppress peaceful religious expression. Another thing that we've worked on, many of you have followed, our work on behalf of the disappearing Coptic women and girls. One of our most sustained efforts in this past year was working on the disappearance of trafficked Coptic women. We issued a global appeal that has thousands of signatures and brought a lot more international attention to this issue. One of the most alarming cases many of you are probably familiar with is that of Silvana Atefanus, a minor with a documented intellectual disability. She was forcibly converted and married, and her family still cannot get her back, despite knowing who has her, which police officials have been involved with her abduction. There's still absolutely no justice for this girl. Another thing that we have worked on is protecting Christian heritage. One of the most visible and ongoing efforts is for St. Catherine's Monastery, which is one of the world's oldest continuously functioning Christian monasteries and one of Christianity's most important living religious sites. Last November, Coptic Solidarity hosted a congressional briefing that was dedicated to preserving religious heritage in the MENA region, and we specifically focused on St. Catherine's. We also organized a series of advocacy meetings with our partners, with the State Department, with USERV, with congressional offices, where each minority group was able to talk about how to preserve the heritage and what are the most concerning issues for their communities. With St. Catherine's, our advocacy also is extended to the proposed legislation governing Egypt's Holy Family Trail. This is rather new. We support responsible development and tourism, but churches and monasteries aren't merely tourist destinations. They are living religious institutions. The concern raised by the proposed legislation is not development, but the transfer of authority over sacred Christian sites into increasingly centralized state structures. As we recently argued in a report, or actually an article written by Raymond Ibrahim on behalf of Coptic Solidarity, the fundamental question remains unchanged. Who controls Christian heritage, and under whose authority does it continue to exist? Lastly, we've worked in international advocacy. We, last month, participated in the 24th session of the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. We met with UN officials, we met with human rights advocates, a lot of different UN country missions to talk about all of these cases that I've just mentioned, including protection of religious heritage in St. Catharines. Our staff member, Mark Basta, who's in the back, delivered an official intervention. You can watch that online. It was a very, very good speech that basically talked about how we need to preserve the religious and cultural heritage for COPs. And our intervention also highlighted St. Catherine's Monastery, church demolitions, and the broader erosion of equal citizenship. This is one of the main things that we've done since we received the UN ECOSOC status. Tomorrow, I think this is the thing that I'm most excited about from this last year. Tomorrow, we're officially launching one of the most ambitious projects in our organization's history, which is CoptWatch. You may have seen that on our website. So for decades, Egyptian authorities and their advocates have dismissed anti-Coptic discrimination as a collection of isolated incidents. Every church attack is described as unique, every mob assault is described as local, every disappearance is treated as an exception. But CoptWatch is going to make those excuses increasingly impossible. With systematic documentation of these incidents across Egypt, the platform will track not only what happened, but also who was targeted, who committed the abuse, how authorities responded, whether the perpetrators were prosecuted, and whether victims received justice. So for the first time, journalists, policymakers, all of the people who work on these issues will be able to identify the recurring patterns of anti-Coptic discrimination. The database won't just preserve information, it will expose these patterns and patterns reveal systems. Through CoptWatch, claims that discrimination consists of only a handful of isolated incidents can now be tested against evidence. Documentation alone cannot create accountability, but accountability is impossible without documentation. So we invite you to join our CoptWatch briefing tomorrow. It's from 10 to 11:30 in 440. The building room number is 440 in Cannon, House Office Building. And then in closing, building the next generation. This year has demonstrated the importance of investing in future leaders. One of our biggest developments has been the reforming of our internship program. So a lot of the work that we've done this year was only possible through the expansion of that program. Our former intern, who is now an employee, Mark Basta, he played a key role in redesigning this program because at his age, he knows exactly what is useful, what young people are looking for in their experience. And so a lot of the accomplishments that I've just discussed that we were able to do this last year are really possible because of the increase with interns. These leaders are helping document the human rights abuses, conduct research, engage policymakers, and build the tools that will support advocacy for years to come. And wherever their careers take them, ultimately, considering many of them aren't Coptic, they will always have the deeper understanding of who COPs are, what are the issues that they face, and they will be able to take that into any future career and continue to spread awareness. So those are the things that we've done this past year. Thank you so much for your support. A big thanks to our board members who are constantly making this possible, who are donating. And if you have any questions about our work, please feel free to check in with me at any point during the conference. Thanks.